Mark, just confirming, we'll see those who are attending online on that one screen that you displayed earlier. And then hopefully they'll raise their hand if there are any questions, so we can see that they have questions. Okay, it's after 5:15. I think we'll get started. My name is Jenny Nolan. I'm the budget manager for the City of Englewood. If there's no objection from either chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Budget Advisory Committee, I'll start the meeting, but then turn it over to you all to have the conversation that we're going to have this evening. Prior to starting our meeting, just wanted to thank all the members for attending this evening to discuss the prioritization tool and let us know your pain points and see how we can make this process a little bit easier for you all, since you're the major users of this tool. We would like to start with roll call, so if everybody in the room will introduce themselves, and then we'll have those who are online to introduce themselves for the record, and then we'll start our meeting. So my name is Jenny Nolan, budget manager for the City of Englewood.
I'm Kevin Ingles, Finance Director.
Rita Russell, Council Liaison to the Budget Advisory Committee.
David Renson, Planning and Zoning.
Aaron Martinez, Planning and Zoning Commission.
Amy Cesario, Planning and Zoning.
Sean Lewis, City Manager.
Brian Isom, Planning Manager.
Noah Kaplan, Planning and Zoning Commission.
Laura Cooper, Budget Advisory Committee.
Brenda Hupka, Deputy Chair, Planning and Zoning.
Steve Ward, Council Liaison to the Budget Advisory Committee.
And those online?
Andrew Forlines, Budget Advisory Committee.
Devin Mondel, Budget Advisory Committee.
Jay Knight, Budget Advisory Committee.
Stephen Rudell, Plan and Zoning Commission.
Tim Dodd, Deputy City Manager.
Colin Haggerty with Planning and Zoning Commission.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So as I mentioned, tonight we're going to be discussing the CIP prioritization process and tool. And in the agenda, I've identified some of the changes that we had received feedback from both the commission and the committee. First one is to pre-populate, and again, this is not an all-inclusive list, so it's just a starting point for our discussion for this evening. But for the tool, we would like to pre-populate the scores for the department prioritization ranking and the ongoing operational costs. Also, there was a mention of a separate tab for each of the tier priorities, so a separate tab for those capital requests that are tier 1, 2, 3, or 4. One of the process changes relayed was to provide the national survey results, provide a link for the members to also include that in their decision-making process. And then also, prior to your meeting where you finalize and I think we're doing this, but if we're not, please let me know. But prior to you finalizing your CIP results for the city manager, which is also then relayed to council members, we provide a consolidated ranking of all the members, and then at that meeting, I think you'll make any final decisions. If the project didn't quite fall in the ranking that you had wanted, then you'll move it up or down in the listing. And then we've also included the attachments that may help in our discussion. First one is the matrix. I don't know if there's a delay in, but anyway, this provides the average score of all the members. Oops, something happened. And that average score is then added to the department ranking as well as the internal capital review committee ranking to get an overall average ranking score for the capital items. The next item in our attachments, I think so. But I don't know why it's not flipping when I switch my tabs. Oh, here we go. It's just a timing. And then the next is just the ranking of all of the capital requests for 2026 in order. Third attachment is the ranking or the criteria rubric. And then the last item was just added yesterday afternoon, the finalized 2026 CIP requests. So with that, I'll let you all, I don't know if either of the chairs want to have opening comments to kick us off, or if you just want to have whoever start the conversation.
Yeah, I don't have anything to open.
Nothing in particular. We did write a memo, which I don't know if that was circulated with planning and zoning or not. If you don't mind, I would like to just read that and then we can go wherever you want.
That's great.
Okay. So we visited on the CIP decisions or ranking that we created in the May meeting. And this is a summary on June 4th of 25. The Budget Advisory Committee would once again like to offer its appreciation for being included in the annual Capital Improvements Project, CIP, prioritization process. The 2026 prioritization workbook provides our rankings recommendations for your review. During our May 27th meeting, the BAC discussed these rankings in detail. As a result of this discussion, in addition to the prioritization workbook, the committee is providing the following additional points for your consideration. One, there was a broad consensus among committee members that the two elements that most influenced prioritization of projects were A, repairs to existing infrastructure, and B, whether proposed projects enhance safety. Two, additional considerations that were taken into consideration in establishing project rankings included the urgency with which the project was classified, noting that urgency is often accompanied by the element of safety noted above, whether the project yields economic benefits, and to a lesser extent expands accessibility. Three, the committee had questions about the inclusion of parks, recs, and library requests in light of the parks initiative that was approved by Inglewood voters in November 2024. There was a significant discussion of the prioritization workbook tool itself by the BAC. Key points of the discussion included: a number of committee members noted that the workbook in its current iteration lends itself to small value judgment. We can expand that. The committee plans to undertake a more comprehensive review of the tool and offer recommended changes, which is what we're doing tonight. Among those modifications, the tool, an indication of whether a proposed project has remained on a list of projects for multiple years, an indication of whether a portion of the proposed project is in progress or has been completed. The proposed project represents a subsequent phase needed to complete the overall project. An indication of cost of proposed project in the context of overall funds available for CIPs in a particular year. Methodology for giving equitable consideration to less visible departments. The example was communications. And methodology for reviewing the top priority project individually by department versus as part of a consolidated list for all city departments. And then there's a basic thank you, and James Horan wrote that for us. What do you want to accomplish tonight?
I think it's an opportunity to share some feedback over use of the tool. I know we had some challenges where I think things were weighted. You know, the scoring matrix that there put some undue weight on certain things and undervalued some other things. So I'm going to dig through my notes really quickly in front of me to bring up some of that. But if anybody from either committee or commission would like to share their thoughts, I think we can just open it up unless you have any other. Okay.
I know I sent you some recommendations. My concern was mostly just getting people through the tool a little quicker. You know, things that we don't need to see can just be blanked out or hidden. I know that there was one field that we were simply duplicating that was already, that just needed to be put in there. I think it was the, the department director scoring, I think, and how, what level that was, right? We were just copy pasting it. So yeah, that kind of thing. I just want to get people through this tool because it was, I think I missed some of it. I had to go back because I didn't realize I needed to scroll down. So I'm not here to say we should do capital funding differently at all. I'm here to say, let's try to get this tool, user-friendly. That's all. Thanks.
I've got what I think is a pretty minor comment, but a handful of the items are ongoing and a lot of them are one-time expenses, but because they're mixed in sort of randomly, it might help people who are analyzing the tool see those broken out separately, since an ongoing $1 million expense adds up a lot quicker than a $2 million one-time expense. So I think that would be helpful.
Could you clarify a little bit more about the national survey results, what that entails? I'm not sure if I was familiar with that part of the discussion.
I believe that was a question from one of the members. So if somebody recalls making that request, they could provide insight.
Oh, I can. I did say that let's make sure that, well, when we went into our meeting, I know some members on planning and zoning asked why is transportation and safety the one thing we should, why is that the priority? And all I could say was, oh, well, there was this survey, I think. I don't know when the survey is and I don't have the results. So, if we could point to that quickly so next year somebody can say, oh, here's what the citizens thought.
Yeah, I mean, just in practical use, I mean, we get all of these projects in front of us and, there's a lot of subjectivity and individuals and providing input. I think there's an opportunity perhaps for the next cycle of this to include reference to comprehensive plan initiatives, things that are laid out in other city documents or planning documents that we can tie to. So it's not just, I really care about pedestrian safety, or I really care about parks, and tying it back tying our scoring back to something a little more objective. So that's one comment. The other one was, I really noticed inconsistency in how departments provided information. Some department heads were very thorough. They provided a lot of information about sort of the scale and the scope of each project. These are based on firm bids. Here's all of the matching funds or what's required. And then some of the other projects just didn't have that. And so I felt like I couldn't make as good of a decision on those. And it was just very clear that it was inconsistent across teams and departments.
So are you looking for a template that each department capital request
Again, I
follows?
think maybe even the instructions given to them was a little bit subjective. If there is a sort of rubric or some sort of guidance to be like, all right, we need these 5 pieces of information, and then be consistent across what we're asking department heads to provide. I think some of that came through and some of it didn't on other projects.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, would you like further clarification from Tim Dodd about the survey question?
Sure.
Can you go ahead, Deputy City Manager Dodd?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So just 2 quick things on the survey and also prioritization. So first, we're more than happy to give the survey results. They're also on the city's website. It is a scientific survey that's done through, I forget the exact name of it right now, but it's through a company called Polco that we use for other services. But yes, it does provide quite a bit of data that could be helpful to the committees. But I also wanted to point out that the reason that there were certain areas that were set as priorities, that actually ties back to our strategic plan. So every year, usually in January, council holds a retreat where they basically make some decisions and modifications to the plan. Next year, we're actually going to be creating a new plan, a new 5-year plan. But as part of that discussion, council does prioritize the 8 what we call outcome areas. Some other cities refer to those as themes. So safety and infrastructure were the top 2 prioritized by council, and that was why they were prioritized in there.
I should have introduced myself since I was late. Chair Peter Eckel, by the way. We also found some inconsistency, just what was expected of each of the departments. And then coupled with that was some what we called value judgments, which are we looking at total spend first? Are we looking at departments next? And while there was tie back to the strategic initiative, I think that was not part of the tool in terms of us saying, oh, this is part of the strategic plan. Where does this priority fall? So maybe that should just be a ranking in and of itself. And I think safety being one of the foregoing concerns, small value judgments would be where, say, we had a smaller dollar project that still ranked out just because of its safety factor, whether that was a small dollar or a big dollar.
I noticed a couple things I think related to the safety and the transportation also, and because if it wasn't a transportation project, you'd have to basically put that as a 0 for some of those rankings, and I know that was kind of part of the weighting, I think, was the intent there, but I think it makes it a little challenging when there's a specific criteria category for transportation, and it's not a transportation project, so do we just 0 those out? And so I think maybe if there was different tabs for safety, for transportation, for other ways to break it down to maybe help clarify again how those will get weighted and brought in might just help clarify some of those questions.
So basically having a weighting for each of the outcome results. We might weight infrastructure and safety a little higher because those are city council's priorities. Something in that regard?
Yeah, and I think it's, again, I think it goes back to what Aaron was saying, it depends on what we are looking at as the priority for us in these. And so I think providing the ability to rank them how we think should be the appropriate ones, and then those scores are then taken and put into however the council would like to see it focused on, whether that be transportation or safety, I think would maybe be a way to kind of mitigate some of the challenges with just it being the confusion of like, it's not a transportation project, so I have to rank it as 0, even though I think this might be a very important project for this particular, item.
I found the issue with the
the themes to be not just the sort of prioritization given to transportation and safety, but the way that those things were defined. Almost everything that the city government does, especially on a capital projects list, is going to have some connection, to those categories. But then when you look at like infrastructure as a criteria, the points are based on, 3 points if it's immediate asset replacement due to end of useful life. And then it goes down to not a repair project. So anything that is infrastructure that is net new automatically gets a 0 on that criteria because it's not a repair project. And this is supposed to be the capital projects list, not maintenance. And so much of the budget was chewed up by basic kind of ongoing maintenance things, both from the way that this was scored, but also just from the point of basically there were certain large things that we essentially couldn't deprioritize. And so I think, we have not, I know that's what we're doing right now. We have not previously had the ability going into the process to kind of have input on this rubric. It was given to us and then we went, go. And I think I think a lot of us, prior to even having gone through it, could have looked at the rubric and provided this kind of feedback ahead of that scoring to note that those were going to be the things that were going to, make it difficult to complete the task.
Kind of along those same lines, and I could be remembering this incorrectly, but it was up to members to input some of this scoring, which it seems like there should be some objective or pre-filled, like this project is this. It's not up to my interpretation of what it is. It should be up, I think, to maybe the department heads to define, this is an immediate asset replacement, or this is a repair that can be deferred up to 2 years. I think those were up to members to input those. And it seems like we don't have the knowledge of that when we're not judging that. That's what staff is determining. I think it's up to us to figure out which ones. Right? So some of the scoring, I think, whether it's part of the scoring or some other part of the tool, should be pre-populated based on an objective set of criteria for what those things mean.
And I will add to your point, of the top 17 that were funded, add in the Civic Center parking garage repairs, which were not on this selection or ranking when we received them. Those items that included repairs and or maintenance totaled to $3.4 million.
I believe when we went through this last year, we had to come back the second time we did it with information on what was put into the budget the previous year and what was spent on those items. Does that ring a bell with any of the P&Z? Yeah. So I think having that information up front would make it easier to go through the prioritization. I remember that specifically when we were talking about making the neighborhoods more ADA compliant. How much did we allocate for ADA compliance versus how much was spent? And that helped us gauge what we all thought should go forward for items in the current year.
Yeah, and a total tally of that total project over however many years it's been ongoing, right?
That's
and
right.
Where we are in relation to the finality of that project by a date or timeline, and also in a dollar spend, right?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
My name is Chris Bellot. I'm an Englewood resident. First time I've been to a meeting like this. I was invited by Peter and Eric. So here I am, and I really like what you're all saying. I've been here 6 years, and I really like it here, and I think it's great, and it's my first meeting ever. So I'll just sit back and listen, but I really like Inglewood. So thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for participating.
I'm kind of curious. So we've talked a lot about the priorities and things that are talking about immediate asset replacement, as in this bridge is going to fall over if we don't fix it. So it feels like we're being asked to sort of prioritize things that are, let's be honest, kind of a foregone conclusion that we need to do certain things, and not that we shouldn't be aware of those contributions to the whole, capital improvement. But I wonder if there's a way to highlight the things that are, again, sort of foregone conclusion that this has to happen or the city's going to sort of come to a screeching halt. Nothing's set in stone, of course, but I think the things that maybe council, maybe department heads can get together before P&Z reviews it and just highlight those things so that we're not nickel and diming, things that are $20,000 projects when there's a $3 million bridge that has to get fixed. It just feels like so many of the pieces are so huge and obvious that we could maybe pay more attention to the smaller pieces that may get funded or may completely be ignored. But being distracted by the high dollar must-haves feels like it's taking away from actually analyzing the smaller projects.
I have a question about procedure for how, when department heads put these, or what departments put these requests together, at what point, have they already gone through a procurement? Has there been competitive bids? Have there been RFPs? Or is this just kind of like, I think it's going to cost? I'm just curious about it. And I'm sure it's all over the board, but yeah, what does that typically look like?
I don't believe they've gone through procurement saying some projects may be construction ready or design ready. And so the departments are pulling together that information in terms of how much will it cost for the design phase, say, or the construction phase, depending on where they are in the process. Or if it's a new capital item acquisition, they'll get those estimated costs ahead of time just to see, how much this item might cost us. But for our maintenance and ongoing, some of those costs, they, just through historic expenditures, they know they need X amount of dollars year over year for the maintenance of these capital assets, prior to them actually having to be fully replaced. But as the information that we did provide last year, per the feedback, we do provide you with, and maybe we can do, I should be able to do a better job in providing you maybe like a 5-year expenditure for especially those ongoing items. But this, by seeing how much they have spent, over a period of time, whether it's a year or 5 years, then that gives you all a little bit of flexibility to maybe kind of push back on departments and say, well, it looks like you're spending this amount, but you're requesting this amount in the current year and then the next 4 years. Do you really need that amount, or or do you need more? Because we're only able to update or improve certain amount of assets at a particular point in time. So. And then departments are also working with their corresponding commissions and board members to develop this list and their ranking of their capital requests for the 5-year period. So we're trying, I think, to give some flexibility. Yes, there are some items that, we have ongoing maintenance of certain things that off the top, we just have to say, these projects need to be funded, or these programs need to be funded. But I think where you have some flexibility is in the dollar amount request, dependent upon, the historic request and the actual spend. for those items.
And if I can add to that, Mr. Chairman, there are kind of three different pots of projects. The maintenance projects are the ones that, to Jenny's point, we have kind of historically spent. But the streets department, for instance, is going out, doing an assessment of the streets and saying, okay, we think this year we need this much in the zone kind of system that we use moving around the quadrant system of the city. Most other departments are for specific projects, whether it's a gateway, a wayfinding gateway. We've already gone to the vendor without a procurement process, but gone to vendors and said, how much would this cost, so that we can plug that number in. I would not say there are any WAGs, if you will, in the CIP. By the time we bring it to you, we have talked to vendors, we've talked to our engineers, we've talked to architects to find out what the price is, so that we're plugging in. And then kind of that third category is the unknowns. And this year was this garage attached to this building, where something comes up that is a must fix, and it's going to cost this amount. And as you know, to your point, there's frustration for you all, there's frustration for us, because it kind of changes the dynamic of the budgeting process.
I had another maybe question about the budgeting process. It sounds like the Budget Commission, the Plan and Zoning Commission went through this prioritization ranking. Did City Council also go through the prioritization tool, or did you guys just use your own ways of figuring out how you wanted to prioritize?
This is Councilman Ward. We don't actually use this particular tool at a council level. I believe that that's been experimented with in the past, but generally we use the information that you give us in the tool to inform a lot of our decision making as we look at what our priority should be when we have a tight squeeze for money and we don't know which projects we need to fund and which ones we need to defer to the next year.
And I would like to, this is Council Member Rita Russell. Actually, you are both advisory committees to the council, and so we're weighting what you share with us pretty highly. So appreciate the time you take to work on this.
I will add, well, we're on the topic of the total 7.695 million between PIF and or capital and public improvement funds. There was an additional almost 1.1 million, $1,086,194, or roughly 14+% that was spent after on projects that we did not select in the top, call it 25, that were selected to be funded by the city after we created this review.
Would it be possible to create some kind of a visual tool that gets added to this? So it's an interactive spreadsheet, and as far as I know, a lot of times you can essentially auto-generate a graph or some other type of tool. That I know one of the questions that P&Z had when we were discussing this back and forth was, okay, we selected X, Y, and Z, where are we at with the total budget? And it became this just ongoing math problem, which is doable, but kind of a pain. And I think a visual tool that shows the total bucket of money and everything you add to it, maybe even weighted with its priority, could probably be created as sort of a add-on to the tool that helps make it obvious when you select 5 or 6 small things. They may barely make a dent, but they might really have a positive impact on whatever it is. But I think just visually to see how much of the budget we've eaten up, especially if we go through and click off the must-have bridge repairs first, it might make it a little easier to have those conversations honestly quickly, as opposed to going all the way through it and going back and realizing we're $2 million over.
I would like to request that the tiering that the departments do potentially be done differently, because I think the idea that the tier 1 urgent projects already total more than the available budget puts us in a really tough spot, right? How are we supposed to cut from a list that every department head has said is an urgent priority? I think we need to redefine what an urgent priority means, so that essentially those tier 1, anything that gets tagged tier 1 like we shouldn't touch. If the department head says like this is an urgent priority, then probably like we're going to go along with that. But I think that only works if urgent actually means urgent, not just like this is my number one priority as a department head. If it got done, it would be great for my department, but it's not urgent for safety reasons or, the other things that we've brought up. And I think if we could get that tier 1 down to really only those things that are non-negotiable, then that would help us to prioritize, to focus our prioritization on things that are not actually urgent, non-negotiable priorities. And maybe that means there's more tiers. Maybe that means the departments, like between the departments, have done some ranking before it reaches us. But I think right now the incentive, it seems like for the department heads, is to have as many tier 1 priorities as they can. And that doesn't really, when everything's a priority, nothing's a priority, right? We can't know what that means.
And we felt the same way.
And I think that also means that things from communications are always going to be lower priority than public works, infrastructure, transportation. That's just how it's going to play out.
Actually, I would like to weigh in here, and this is something that you all probably ought to look at, especially planning and zoning. Your job is described in the charter, and it is really ultimately planning and zoning's job to come up with what the projects are, not city staff. And so that's might be something that you all would consider doing, because then maybe you should be weighting what is the most important. But I would look at what the charter describes as your job, and then you could go from there. That's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Councilwoman Marshall, I appreciate that. I think we also have to rely on our experts that we have at the city that are the ones who are in this every day, and look to their guidance and look to what they have to deal with and have expectations of and need to operate a safe city, and utilize that information to the extent possible. I don't want to sit there and tell Mr. Lewis how to do his job, and I want his teams to be able to have faith that what they are proposing is what we're still taking. Now, we can have some variations in there, but we need to be able to rely on that data, I think is where we're coming from. So our next steps for this tool, this was, I believe, developed, if I'm not mistaken, outside and then is taken inside, and you've been working on, Jenny, developing and modifying and improving. The spreadsheet is the intent that we continue with these improvements, and then it's shared again maybe before we get closer to the prioritization timeline next year, and so we can maybe all weigh in again, or what are the next steps that you envision kind of coming through?
Yes, I would like to, from what we've discussed this evening, make those improvements to the tool. We'll also have to sit down with the department directors and also explain or give them the feedback that we've been given regarding tiering. And then, yes, come back hopefully in January and have you all look at the tool again, see if I've documented all of your changes correctly as best I can, and move forward so that we'll be ready by April for you guys to use the tool again.
I'd like to make one more request on the tool itself. The functionality, it jumps around a little bit as you're kind of moving between. I'm sure you probably have done this in many different ways to try to figure out what is the best way to do it, and I'm not sure that I know what the best way is, but sometimes I'm like, where the heck am I? I was moving around, and so if there's any other ways that you've considered of laying out the information so that it can be scored, I would definitely be curious to see if it could just be a more straightforward table that has all the rankings kind of together and you're not jumping around as much. It just might make it a little easier more palatable to be able to digest the information, if I can make that request.
And we agree. I think it would be very helpful if it was simply rows and columns and a pivotable format, so we can put a pivot table on it and all the data is there, because I found it very difficult on my laptop to go through all the fields, and then I had to go back, make sure I put the right number in, and then it was calculating on the back end. And so we agree, just rows, columns, one page, and whatever information we need in there to make a decision where we can pivot table, report the results would be helpful.
Also procedural, but I would love to be able to see what I have not entered, some sort of conditional formatting, and not be able to enter values that aren't on the rubric. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree with both of those. I think a more simplified, at least the interface side of the spreadsheet. But also I think it's important, and I think we talked about this when we were doing this work earlier in the year, have the organization of that spreadsheet very closely aligned with the document that describes all the projects. There was a lot of, they weren't in the same order. We're going through it in a meeting. We'd have to flip, find the page in the PDF, match it up with the location on the spreadsheet. So somehow, tying those, not the same document, but just similar order at least. I did just happen to pull up the charter, and it's the commission shall submit annually to the city manager, not less than 90 days prior to the submission of the budget, a list of recommended capital improvements arranged in order of preference, which in the opinion of the commission are necessary or desirable to be constructed during the forthcoming 5-year period. So this is talking about a 5-year plan as well here, which I know we've been doing these on a 1-year basis. But I think it is, in order to form that opinion of the commission, we desperately need the input of the city staff and department.
I think one of the things that we haven't talked about yet relative to that is that when you participate in this project, you have a list already in front of you. But that reading of the charter entitles you to say, hey, I want this other thing, and it's not on this list. So let's get a write-up of what it's going to take to make that happen. That's very useful feedback for us as council members, because we're operating off of the list that staff gives us. Unless we have contact from someone in our district that says, hey, I have this problem that needs to be addressed, and we can deal with it. But keep that in mind as well. You have the tool, it gives you some structure, but ahead of that being produced, if there are projects that you think should go ahead, regardless of whether or not we actually have the money to do them or they're practical, getting them on that list is the first step towards getting them done.
That's great input, Councilmember Ward. I don't think that we've had that clarity in the process of, yes, this is a big list of what all the departments want, but it's up to us to actually put that list.
If I can add to Member Ward's comments, it's a little ironic because the Water and Sewer Board have the discussion of what do we want in the CIP. The Library Board has the discussion of what do we, and so does ETAC. But the two commissions that have the most authority over prioritizing and getting that to council and staff are your two commissions. And I'm not sure we put it on the agenda of brainstorming for projects. So maybe that should be an annual process, like a meeting dedicated to what projects do you think would move the city forward and advance the community together? Because it is on the agendas of the other three boards that have a much smaller kind of narrow scope in the CIP. So good point, Member Ward.
Thanks, City Manager Lewis. And we agree, and that's a great point. And I'll volunteer our committee to do a planning or pre-CIP meeting with you all, and maybe we come up with the list that we each think, talk about it, and then when we get to the tool, we kind of have some direction about where each of us are going, and we may not agree, obviously.
Yeah, no, I think that leads to much more healthy debate and conversations in both of the bodies to come up with that. Yeah, let's talk about what that kind of pre-step in the process would look like. I think it would still be helpful to have sort of the staff recommended list of projects at that point, but also to add to, and maybe it's a much more informal process where we're not trying to go score everything in the first meeting, but it's really about brainstorming and bringing those ideas.
Right. The way we did it this year was a little different than the way in the past. That is, all the directors spoke to city council, and then when it came to us, we were told, well, go watch the city council meeting if you want all the information. And then the directors came to us and we were able to ask questions. We didn't get the presentation again, but that was meant for us to move this along quickly. And by the way, you should have watched that city council meeting to make sure that you understand everything. And here's your handout. It's okay to do that, but having some of these pre-meetings so that we do know what to expect. And again, talking about what the strategic plan is and how, if we do come up with these projects, how do they fit? So I don't mind having more meetings to talk about it for sure, rather than kind of rushing us through it, which is kind of how it felt, at least this last year.
I would agree with that. And I was new in February, I think. Was it February? And so when it came to me, even though I had watched meetings, I really had no idea what we were doing. There was no discussion prior. It was just this pamphlet to me. And so I'm just kind of listening to the rest of them saying, I wish this, I wish that. And the whole time I'm thinking, I don't even know I didn't really understand where even my role was in it. So if we do a conversation, maybe do it after after February, and give enough time to think and be able to ask some questions, not just a week or 2 weeks, but to be a little bit more thoughtful, because there would have been many more questions that I would have had I realized what I was actually doing. Okay.
I guess I'd also be a little curious on, the city council has input on these as well. Like, I don't want to get your input beforehand, but how do we make sure that, we're also taking into account what you all are hearing as the people who are, I guess, I think maybe a little closer to the constituents a little bit more. You're hearing a little more on the street about what they want. How do we help formulate that into the overall scoring as opposed to us providing our recommendations and then you all saying, okay, thank you, and then we're going to decide what to do, which is what your role is, but how do we incorporate that maybe a little bit better? I don't know if there's an option or maybe just something to think about.
I'm not sure that you're obligated to go that far. One of the reasons why both of these committees are involved directly in this process is because you have a ground level expertise that isn't prevalent in the rest of the community. Not to downplay any particular member of the community's input relative to capital, but this process is more designed to, I think, give us a sort of a high level, kind of more global. It's in part a values judgment, but when I get approached by members of the community, I get micro requests, not macro requests. So we're looking macro through this process, and I think in large part, personally, it's more helpful to have the committee members uniquely sort of sharing their opinion on what happens as you all are a diverse makeup and hand selected by council to serve on these boards.
I would agree with that. And I just, the one thing that you are all looking at are the capital projects. And it's probably best if you don't watch council meetings and you make the decisions, because we're counting on you for input and advice. And that's your job when you're meeting, is to discuss what the capital needs of the city are. And so I think that Council has so many other things that we deal with, but your focus is this area. And so I appreciate what you're doing. And I don't really think you have to watch council. Thank you.
One of the challenges I could foresee with us proposing projects is the fact that there's a number of the large ticket items that we don't have a lot of detail about what's in there. So we talked, I know, about things like, the line item for walk and wheel plan implementation, right? So like in general, that is something that's very important to me. However, I don't know if we cut, 100,000 from that line item, like what goes? And if we cut 200, what goes? I don't know, because I don't know what that, 750,000 or whatever that line item is actually earmarked to do. Walk and wheel plan implementation doesn't tell me that. And then we have areas like, things like pavement maintenance by area, which are some of the biggest, line items where, I just don't know, like, can we actually determine that we could do less of that or not? Like, what is the area that budget would cover? And, I think if we're going to get to that level of not just ranking these priorities, but also coming forward with the things we think might be missing, we really need to know what's under those titles so that we know what might be missing, right? We can't do that if we don't know what's there.
Agreed, and that's a great example. The request was, 390,000 for 26. And in fact, there were several items that both the committees ranked in 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, which include library furniture, service center building 2, the current divider, replacement IT, that did not get funded. However, walk and wheel was funded at 140,000 out of the 390, call it 33%. And then there were others that were added to this that were well below the walk and wheel implementation, which included the rec center doors, the emerald ash borer mitigation, and art in public places at 1%.
I would just add from the staff perspective that we did hear that same critique from council saying, okay, you've got to give us broken out projects in that massive walk and wheel number. I think to your point on things like street paving by area, even the sidewalk gap, some of that work, knowing where that is, how it ranks in terms of the new criteria that we're using with a machine that we're driving over the streets. We know which segment of roadway is a grade F versus a grade A. We certainly can be more granular, but for sure we heard that from council in the final decision process that we've got to break out those walk and wheel programs so y'all know what to fund. And we will provide that to you all next year for sure.
Well, I think certainly activities that can be broken out, but also I would imagine some of these projects are scalable, where they could be funded at a percentage of what's being requested, and it'd be good to know which ones we can do that with.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, and I think we understood for ourselves, is that so the request is $390,000 for walk and wheel, for instance. Only $140,000 was funded. And it was considered tier 1 urgent as part of the public improvement fund, number 16 specifically. So, right, there's something missing between what was funded and what was requested and what got cut, or what was intentionally, or what was intended by the $390,000 and what didn't make the final roll, so to speak.
It's also helpful if we would know if, for example, the walk and wheel, if we have a $390,000 request, if it's only funded $140,000, is it even going to happen? Right? Because it's either in some of these line items, you need all of the money in order to complete it. So funding it at less than full, it might not make a whole lot of sense to to fund it at all if it can't be funded in full. So knowing what those items that need to be funded in full in order to go forward with the capital improvements would make a big difference in our decision-making process.
Anything else we should discuss at this juncture?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, we've been talking a lot about the tool. We've added a little bit to the process about some brainstorming ahead of time. Is there anything with the overall process folks have input on, the timeline, the information received, aside from just the tool?
I think generally it just, I think this has been sort of alluded to by a few folks. It's just too much information compressed into one meeting. It's just way too much to be thoughtful and critical about things. At the risk of asking for more homework, I would sort of appreciate like more, almost like a longer elevator pitch from each department about just summarizing in plain English as opposed to a spreadsheet about what they're asking for and why, and maybe some of the nuance about, you know, what's happening in the walk and wheel plan could be broken out just in simple paragraph form so that we can have a more conversational understanding of what's being asked for. Looking at a line item of sort of short description without any detail and a huge number is so vague. I mean, nobody really knows enough about individual things from our sort of broad perspective to be useful there. And then sort of to a few different points about partial funding versus whatever and what you get. I mean, same thing. It's like you can't build a house without a foundation, but you can change your tile or something like that, right? So seeing those things broken out would be super helpful. And again, I think using colors on the tool would be helpful to help highlight those things that can be partially funded and not, just to make it easy to highlight those visually.
Agreed. And maybe with the presentations from the departments, sort of maybe this is one of the more penultimate points of the discussion is to understand what do you want slated for the capital improvement fund? Educate us on it. Tell us what the dollar is actually going to be used for. A little bit more granular would help. And that gives us then a month or two or however long we have till May or June, or we have to make this ranking decision to consider it, discuss it in our meetings for 2 or 3 months, and then also have something in a presentation form that gives us some details so we can make that decision.
Yeah, I think even just having the department heads come to P&Z and present in broken up phases would be fine. But yeah.
From the Budget Advisory Committee perspective, we get to hear from the department heads. So I think there's some items we can take away in terms of what we request from their presentations, especially the capital heavy departments, that would allow us to really focus in more those discussions and those presentations on those capital requests and get some of that information within the time that we have in our committee meeting.
And we're not scared of homework, but we've done a lot of homework this year.
This does get to one of the interesting differences between these two committees. The Budget Advisory Committee has 2 council liaisons that serve alongside the committee members. P&Z, by its nature, is a quasi-judicial board, which does not receive a council liaison. So that may partially account for some of the difference in exposure. The other thing is that BAC, by its very nature, in the charter for the committee, in the municipal code, they meet with the department heads every year. They have discussions with them, and they have the ability to summon any department head they wish to come meet with them. So I'll just commit in an effort to make this process work more smoothly. If you guys do need some sort of resource from the city and you feel like you're not getting it, I don't anticipate this being a problem, but please do contact me and we'll see what we can do about it.
I don't think it's a lack of effort from city departments. I think we're all learning again. You know, I remember my first year, like being very overwhelmed with the fact that P&Z was putting together the budget. And so, you know, I think we're getting better each and every year. The spreadsheet's getting better each and every time. You know, I think we're getting there, and it's having some of these additional touch points, and appreciate the support from council. So.
our committee agrees.
I didn't know I was running this meeting, but yeah, so thank you very much for your consideration of all of our comments. I know this is not an easy process, and it's not an easy tool that you've put together, and it's trying to satisfy a lot of desires and a lot of requests. So I appreciate your work and continuing to do this work for us to help us make this job a little bit easier. With that, we'll move on to members' choice. Anybody have anything?
I will just add, maybe before we end the meeting, can we just decide what the timeline is, when our rankings are due, and can we perhaps set a meeting up, hopefully not much homework with your committee in the next 2 or 3 months, I would guess.
Yeah, can you remind us what is the timeline for the next use of this tool in the process?
It may be, the timeline might be, well, it will be moved up, it sounds like. But typically, what we have strived for is having the presentation with directors in April, so that you all have the information, so that you can then meet separately and provide us your recommendations by that 90-day cutoff, which is around the first week in June. So if we're wanting another meeting, we'll probably have to, well, we will need to request capital estimates from departments, probably by the end of January at the earliest. And in the past, it's been March, but our estimates won't be as tight as they could be. So there could be some, by our June meeting with City Council, there might be some adjustments to those capital requests, depending on, the information they have between now and the end of June or end of January.
Yeah, how feasible is that to move their timeline up 2 months?
We'll have to ask.
Yeah. Well, they don't necessarily, maybe the estimates are okay. Obviously, there will be some adjustments. I guess, part of our issue too was we had done this ranking and then there were 4 items added after we did the work. And so I think we also want to avoid that, understanding that, maybe it's not X, it's more Y on the estimate moving to the final product between presentation and our ranking. I think we're okay with some variance.
If that first meeting, like you said, it doesn't have to have specific numbers, but if we could really dig into what everybody thinks the largest, most important projects are, so then we can really start thinking and being able to ask the questions. I don't think we have to have all of the information right away.
Well, if you present it that way, then I think that should be doable. But if you're holding everybody's feet to the fire, that's
yeah, especially if we're asking for some more clarity and some more information on each individual project. We still want that, but maybe on the original timeline with this sort of a preview
of what's to come in April. Okay.
Yeah. Is that February or March or?
I'm thinking it's probably going to be in February, early February.
Thanks, Jenny.
Very good discussion tonight. Thank you all. Good thoughtful input. Appreciate the feedback.
You're welcome. We appreciate the tool, and I'll circulate my notes to you. Please forgive any issues with those, but I think it might benefit the group to have those. So.
I'll include those in the meeting minutes. Thank you.
All right. With that, I think we'll close out new business.
We do have a hand raised.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Online. I always need that reminder.
I just wanted to say, I think that a lot of fair points were raised tonight. I really appreciate all the work that staff does, and I think I think that the points raised tonight are valid. A few of them, have the potential to be at odds with each other. Getting more information sooner and things like that may be difficult. But I just wanted to say I really appreciate all the work that staff has done, and certainly that Jenny and the rest of the staff will do on this, and really appreciate all their help, and just that if not everything's possible, I think that is fair too. But even just information about which aspects of the feedback from tonight may or may not be more easily implemented into our process. Even that feedback, I think would be tremendously helpful. And just wanted to express my thanks to everybody here, both the staff members and of course everybody from these two committees.
Great. Thank you. Close new business. Any member items? Member's choice. Anybody? No. All right. We'll go to staff.
Thank you. I just want to echo Nevin's thanks to you all for the good work. I think all of these suggestions are really helpful and worthwhile. It will move this process forward. I also just want to say, we are very young in this process. When we first started this 4 or so years ago, Member Ward had just asked that the Budget Advisory Committee really be pulled into the CIP process. And then when, things went to council, Member Noonan Camp said, is there any way we can get a priority, like a tool, a ranking? And we looked around the state and couldn't find anything. So we started reaching out to consultants, and they said, there's no such thing. And we had to go out of state to find a city that was doing this. But I think that the feedback that you're giving are making a process that, can be used as a model. But we are learning a little bit as driving the cars. I mix up my metaphors all the time. But I appreciate the feedback because it's making this better. And I think everything that's been suggested tonight is doable and will really strengthen the process. So thank you for your feedback and time on this.
Anything else from staff? All right. With that, we hit the end of the agenda, and we can adjourn. Thanks, everybody.